Good evening and welcome to another Candid conversation. We are so happy that you were able to join us for tonight's discussion. Quick PSA before we get started. Please remember to type in your question in either the comment box or in the link found in the description box. After our speaker is done, they will then answer your questions, which will prove to be difficult if there are no questions to answer. So please remember that a conversation requires more than one person, so do your part. With that being said, relax, type in your question, and let's have a conversation.
Bobby Bovell here, back with you at Mount Pisgah for another episode of Candid Conversations as one of your virtual pastors. How do you deal with the feelings of being a fraud? We're going to talk about today overcoming imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is the experience that you are a fake. You feel perhaps that the successes you had are down to luck and not your own ingenuity or skills. And you may also experience the feeling that when you are getting compliments about work that you've done, that you can't really take them in or accept them. Feel like you have to downplay your successes. Then you may be experiencing imposter syndrome. Now, when it comes to imposter syndrome from a psychological point of view, psychologists typically group this experience in with the area of anxiety. And if we're looking at it from a Christian theology and spirituality point of view, then the things that Jesus had to say about how to deal with anxiety become very relevant in this context when we think about imposter syndrome. And I would like to read from one of the Gospels, chapter 6, verse 25 to 34, where Jesus talks about the experience of having anxiety, and then we'll go into talking about what that's got to do with overcoming imposter syndrome. So in this text, Matthew chapter 6, verse 25 to 34, it goes like this. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, about your body, what you will wear. For is life not more than food, and the body more than clothing? Now, if for a little bit of context, when Jesus is telling this particular group of people about this, is very relevant for them because they lived in the real threat of not being able to put food on the table, not being able to clothe themselves and have shelter, because a lot of those things were dependent on whether or not rain came to water their crops so that they could then either eat it themselves or sell it and get the things that they need, right? So Jesus comes in this context and says, don't worry about it. And when he says, don't worry about it, the background of that argument is that if you're worrying about something like whether the rain is going to come, then that's not a healthy way to live your life. That's not going to make for a healthy and meaningful spirituality, because you will be at the mercy of something that is outside of your control. And that uncertainty, of course, causes worry or anxiety. And he says the way to look at it is look at the birds of the air. So he gives them the example. They neither sow nor reap or gather in barns, but your heavenly Father feeds them. And are you not of more value than they? Now, he's not trying to say that animals are not as valuable as humans, or make some kind of hierarchy. He's talking about the level of life that a human being has, or the bandwidth of life that a human being has, which is greater in capacity to that of a bird. You would agree that birds do not live on the same level as humans do, right? They can make a nest, but they can't build whole cities and civilizations and cultures and make clothes and manipulate their environment to the degree that humans can. So when Jesus says, are you not more value than them? He's not saying that humans are better than animals and that therefore animals can be mistreated by humans. Really what he's saying is that, look, if you look at the way that a bird lives, they don't plant seeds and wait for them to grow, but they somehow survive. And at this point in history, everyone accepts that the world is a created order. So Jesus appeals to this already existing idea in them and says, look, how much would your heavenly Father take care of you as someone who has a greater bandwidth of life than he would over a bird? If the birds don't have to worry, then you don't have to worry. And he goes on, he says, who can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour or span to your span of life? And why do you worry about clothing? He says, consider the lily of the field. They grow, they neither toil nor spin. And I tell you, Solomon in all his glory was not clothed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? Right? Saying, do not worry, saying, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or what will we wear? Now, these ancient concerns are quite similar to our contemporary concerns in the sense that we do also worry about things that we can't control. If we come back now to the idea of imposter syndrome, if you feel like you're a fake, then where do those ideas of feeling like a fake come from? Is that your internal dialogue that is telling you that you're a fake? And what is it based on? Let's say you're a project manager and you've got a project that you need to bring home. Do you have the qualifications of being a project manager, or the experiences, or a plan that you're going to put into action for this project to be finished? If you do, then you can't really call yourself a fake, because a fake is someone who's deliberately trying to pretend they have something that they don't have, right? Like a fake designer purse or something, right? It's pretending to be the genuine article. It's not really made where the label says it was made. It's not made necessarily of the same quality materials as the label says that it is. So there's a level of deception involved there. So if you're not actually trying to deceive people, if you've taken a real inventory of what are my skills, what are my abilities and my qualifications, then don't allow your internal dialogue to talk you out of a position and status that you've earned by virtue of your experience, by virtue of your qualifications. Now, obviously, you might feel like there are gaps in your knowledge that make you feel like a fake. Then take those courses, or just admit where there are gaps. But if you're not pretending about who you are, then imposter syndrome shouldn't be a thing. And anything else outside of that environment of what you actually have as qualifications, or what you actually have in terms of experience, will fall outside of what you can control. Therefore, it's something you shouldn't worry about, right? So maybe it's that you might feel that other people think you're fake, but again, what evidence do you have of that? Has someone said to you that they feel you're a fake, or is it something that you've just told yourself? It hasn't been backed up by anybody. They've said something, you've interpreted it in a certain way that means that they think you're fake. They're fake, you're fake, and you're going to be unmasked at any time as a fraud, right? It's not a thing. We need to base our self-worth and our sense of identity not on that internal voice that tells us that we're fake, but by bigger objective realities, right? In other words, the way that Jesus is saying, your Father in heaven, like that you're part of a bigger picture, in other words, that you don't have to worry about your individual fakeness or genuineness, that you're part of a bigger story and you've been given gifts to be able to fulfill your God-given purpose on the planet. So that's the first way to deal with the imposter syndrome. Start to investigate, okay, am I fake? Let's think about this. The second thing, if you feel like you have received your blessings, so to speak, as a result of luck, the job you've got is a result of luck, well, what's wrong with that? Everyone in life has a certain luck to them. You might have the qualifications, but if you don't ever see the right job to apply for, or you don't know the right people, we could call it luck, we could call it blessing if we are speaking in a theological manner. But we're saying that basically luck is something you can't control either. So again, it's not something you should worry about, because you have to hand it over to a higher power, right? And by doing that, then you avoid imposter syndrome, because it's not about whether or not you're lucky, and you don't have an issue with having been given an opportunity that you feel that you might not have earned, because who really earns the opportunities that they get anyway? Either you have the qualifications to get the job or you don't, and either you can do the job or you don't. Either you're right for the job or you're not. That's not something you can control. It's something that you just need to hand over to God in faith. And then lastly, if you feel like your achievements and the praise that you receive for them are not something you can accept the credit for, then this is also rooted in the feeling of an imposter syndrome, right? Because if you have not been given the praise and accolades deservingly, then clearly you're working under the assumption that people believe that you are something that you're not. And if people believe that you're something that you're not, then when they're giving you those compliments, you can't accept them, because they're not for you. They're for this imaginary person that you believe people think you are, right? Now, again, firstly, you can't control what people think about who you are. It's none of your business. Just let them think what they want. Let them have their opinion about who you are. Don't worry about that. You can't control what every person thinks about who you are. You're not supposed to be everyone's cup of tea. You're not there for everyone to like you. You're there to do a job. You know, if you are everyone's cup of tea, the problem is that everyone drinks you and you end up being drained, right? You need to be exclusive in many ways about an understanding that you have a unique niche and a unique place in the world, right, for you to fulfill. And when you do that, then you can move more easily and more comfortably in the environment of accepting people's compliments. Instead of trying to reject it, why not take it in? Accept that this person likes your clothes, accept that this person likes your work. To do anything else is a sort of rejection of your divine gifts and talents, because you're saying in some ways that you haven't been given anything that's worthy of that sort of admiration, and that if they're really giving you that admiration and then you don't live up to it, then they're going to take it away. But your acceptance of admiration from others is not based on whether or not you deserve it. Your acceptance of admiration from others is based on a gratefulness for the gifts that God has given you. So you don't need to worry about if they're going to take it away, because it's not them that really gave it to you in the first place, right? It's something you've got by virtue of skills and talents that you've built up over the years, by virtue of the blessings that you have, and then finally by virtue of being able to actually say, you know what, I'm grateful for this life that I've got. I'm grateful for these gifts. I'm grateful to be me. So I don't need to try and be anybody else. I don't need to worry about imposter syndrome. So really what I'm saying is, do not worry. Everyone, most people have experienced feelings of being an imposter. It doesn't mean that you are one. You need to do an interrogation of those feelings and ask what evidence you have to support the idea that you could be an imposter. You need to also think about, am I actually trying to be someone else? And then also remember that there's no point in worrying about things that you can't control, because in the final analysis, the things that you can't control aren't worth worrying about, because that doesn't change how tall you are, doesn't change how much money's in the bank, doesn't change much. It just makes life very difficult in the present. So I hope that you'll be able to overcome imposter syndrome. If you want to talk a little bit more, something in comments or contact the guys at Mount Pisgah, and I'm sure that there's lots of people who can guide you and encourage you through your process. All right, well. Hey folks, we have a couple of questions that have come in. One of them is, how can I avoid feeling fake? And as I was saying in the video, the idea of being a fake needs to be investigated. If you are feeling fake about being good at music or something, for example, then let's investigate those feelings. Why would you feel fake? Have you put in the hours of practice? Have you gone in with a genuine desire of curiosity to work things out and to do it at the best of your ability? If you have, then those feelings of fakeness need to be questioned. Why do you look at yourself as a fake? Is it because you're comparing yourself to someone else? A lot of our time these days is spent on social media, and comparing ourselves to others on social media is a real way that we can end up feeling like a fake because we're not them. But let's be genuine about our look at ourselves and not base that fakeness on feelings of fakeness that we might have internally, but rather look at things more objectively. Do you have some skills that you've built up over a period of time? Are you trying to be fake? If you're trying to be genuine, then you don't need to think about whether or not you're fake, because you're leaning on your authenticity as an individual. You're leaning on your genuine curiosity and genuine love, and just really believing that God doesn't see you as a fake. He doesn't see you as someone who is pretending to be something that you're not. Right. So investigate those feelings and question whether or not they are real based on objective things rather than just on your arbitrary feelings about the subject, your self-esteem, right? You're not basing those things on an internal dialogue, which can be negative. We're basing it on the reality that we're the children of God, and that we have just as much right to take up space and to live on this planet as anyone else. I hope that makes sense. Another question that came in: I don't fit in with traditional church people. How do I find a place where I feel like I belong? Well, this is a really big one, guys. If you don't feel like you fit in a traditional church setting, then you need to try to find a community and environment that celebrates you and doesn't just tolerate you, so to speak. How do you find a place where you feel like you can belong? Well, I feel that your vibe usually attracts your tribe. So whatever you project out there into the world typically starts to come back to you. And once you have found people that share common interests, that have a sense of looking at the world in the same way that you do, then you begin to sculpt a community of people around you who are going to feed your soul. It's really easy to walk around and have people around us who are there. Well, what I'm trying to say is that typically there are more people around you who you are feeding than are feeding you, right? So try to get around people, try to connect with people who you feel could feed your soul and could allow you to have a sense of belonging, right? Because without that, it's really going to be difficult for you to to find that place. So what I'm really saying is you need to sculpt it. You need to seek people out and engage them and see if you can develop community with them. So then that's how you find a place where you belong. Another question's coming in. When I visit churches, I feel like I need to change how I am for church people. Is that wrong to fake who I am to be accepted? Well, whenever you enter any new situation, there are some social norms that you would take up. Maybe it wouldn't be your typical way of being. Like you might enter a situation where there's a particular dress code, for example, and you wouldn't normally wear those clothes, but it's a question of what you're going to get out of it and what you feel comfortable with. If changing your way of being in order to accommodate other people and be accepted by others in sort of social norms, then that's different to changing your whole personality. You're becoming someone that you're not in terms of your character. For example, if you are extroverted, then you pretend that you're quiet, or if you're introverted and you pretend that you're loud, then that's being more fake because you're changing your personality, your character in order to fit in, and that's not sustainable. But there's nothing wrong with making sure that you meet up to social norms. However, it depends on what you mean when you say how do I change? Do I need to change myself for church people? Because if you enter a church, you're not there 100% for the people. It's God who calls this community together. They have not called you as an individual. It's God who's called you. So I mean, so if God has called you, then you're supposed to be living up to his standard and his call, so to speak, instead of what they might think is a norm. So I would also question, okay, are these people that are asking you to change in order to be accepted? Are they asking you to change in order to meet up to their cultural and traditional expectations, or are these things actually eternal principles that come from God? So it's a difficult question to answer in terms of whether or not, you know, this change that you're being asked to be made is for them or for God. If it's for them, then I'd be careful. If it's for God, then I'd say do it. But those two things can be very confusing. Right. There's another question that's coming here. And is it okay to fake it until you make it when you're working and developing faith and character to be more like Christ? Yeah, I really like that question. That's a really cool question. C.S. Lewis has got this illustration that he uses about the whole term fake it till you make it. And that is when you see children dressing up, they try on adult clothes because they know that that's where I'm heading. That's what I'm growing into, right? You'll see children put on adults' shoes, for example, because they can see, all right, I'm growing towards that maturity, that level of development as a human, right? That type of faking it until you make it is great, because what you're supposed to do, if you're not where you want to be, then you have to start practicing becoming who you want to be, right? So C.S. Lewis calls it the good kind of pretending, and I really like that. So fake it till you make it is an important part of any process, right? Because you have to use what you've got until you get what you want. You have to practice being who you hope to be in the future, practice sculpting that vision. Well, such a great question. So yeah, when you fake it until you make it, when you're working on developing a faith and a more sort of Christ-like character, so to speak. However, we also need to be careful not to focus too much on the development of this particular character, because that can in itself become a real crutch in terms of spirituality, where we start to lean on this character that they were developing, and then that becomes something we present to God as a sort of transaction to say, yeah, I am worthy of relationship with God, or I'm worthy of the blessings I have because my character has developed to this level, right? We don't develop character in order to approve ourselves to the divine in any way. We develop character so that our lives can be bigger and that we can enjoy the blessings that have been given to us as humans, right? The opportunities for life that we've been given as humans. So yeah, it's okay to fake it till you make it, so to speak, but it needs to be done in a healthy way and not in a way where we're just pretending and glossing over things and not dealing with our issues, not dealing with where we are, because that pretense is gonna in the end up not being sustainable, right? All right, it says, can you identify any Bible characters who may have struggled with imposter syndrome? I think that's also a good question. I think that certainly I think of Jacob, right? Jacob would have very likely struggled with imposter syndrome. His story is a very good example of someone who was faking it until they make it, or they fake it, or who faked it until they made it. And certainly there are lots of different individuals in the biblical account. If you look at the three characteristics that I brought out in the video earlier on, that the whole idea of feeling like you're a fake, like, can you think of someone in the Bible who felt like they were a fake? Can you think of someone in the biblical stories who felt like their life was all the subject of luck and they couldn't take credit for any of their accomplishments themselves, or someone who wasn't unable to accept compliments and unable to accept blessings, unable to accept that they were loved, right? I'm sure there are many different people in the biblical account who would fit that sort of description, right? But coming back to Jacob, definitely he's in a situation where he steals a birthright, so to speak, from his brother. And then he leaves before his brother realizes what's gone on, so that he can keep himself alive, actually. And then he moves into a whole different area, and then years later he comes back and he's struggling with these ideas of like feeling inadequate, feeling that his successes are not his own because he didn't come by them honestly, right? So that wasn't really imposter syndrome, actually. When I think about it, it was more that he had been an imposter, and that he had to move into a stage where he was actually the real deal. He was the genuine article, right? So I think that imposter syndrome is something that we need to really be careful with, in the sense that it's typically something that happens in a work environment. It's typically something that researchers say more women suffer from. Men are more willing to sort of fake it until you make it, but women in general, obviously we're not all some homogenous mass of personalities or behaviors just because we're a man or a woman. They can be attached to either gender, but typically the research says that women will struggle with it more, and so will minorities also. That's an interesting idea, that imposter syndrome is something that affects them more. Are minorities and women often put in situations where their feelings of being fake are reinforced? I would say that that's probably true if they are experiencing situations where they're having to question their ability to do the job, or they're having to question their acceptance in a particular role, right? Then obviously it's going to make imposter syndrome more difficult. But it's important to talk about it, guys. It's important to, as I said, investigate those feelings of inadequacy. Why do you have them? Where did you get them from? Is it something that you are telling yourself, or is it something other people are telling you? Is it something that you can back up with some concrete evidence as to why you are a fake? Do you not have the qualifications that you need for the job? Did you not go to the interview and get the job and get offered the job? Like, why did they offer you the job if they didn't believe that you could do it, right? And just finally, I believe that that's what it's like in Christian theology, in a relationship with the divine. We have been invited to engage and participate with God on this adventure, and that wouldn't be an invitation that you had gotten if you weren't capable of taking up the role. I think that those are all the questions for today. Thank you so much for, yes, I think those are the questions for today. Thank you so much for joining. See you next time. Peace.
Thank you for joining us this evening for Candid Conversation. If you love what you saw here tonight, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as turn on your bell notifications so that way you know every time we go live. Have any questions? Be sure to click the link in our description box and let us know your thoughts. And remember, ain't no judgment on this side. Also, be sure to like, comment, and share us on all of your social media platforms so that way your friends and family can be a part of the community as well and stay in the know of everything here at Mount Pisgah. See you next time.